Hello, everyone. I am so sorry I was muted. Yes, welcome everyone to this conversation today about agriculture data and climate change, the case for infrastructure investment in advancing climate smart agriculture mitigation and adaptation. We're recording this event and we'll share the link afterwards. I am Deb Atwood, Executive Director of AGREE, a bipartisan initiative to transform food and ag policy. AGREE is housed at the Meridian Institute's Washington, D.C. office, and I'm joining you remotely from my home office, which is also in Washington, D.C. Currently, AGREE has two work streams under its platform. The Economic and Environmental Risk Coalition, which creates a bridge between positive environmental outcomes and profitability for farmers and ranchers. And our second work stream is the Climate, Food, and Ag Dialogue, which includes producers, supply chain leaders, and civil society organizations working together to promote federal policy action on climate. And you'll hear more about that later this month. We believe it's important to start our conversation today by hearing from one of our farmers on the ground about the importance of data to their operation. Tara Vanderdusen, she's an environmental scientist and a fifth generation dairy farmer from Eastern New Mexico. And she's a member of our AGREE Climate and Food Ag Dialogue. And she's going to start off by saying a few words about having access to reliable data, technologies, and of course, broadband internet that are fundamental to making sound business decisions. So let's go to the video.
Hi everyone, I'm Tara Vanderdusen, and welcome to our dairy farm in New Mexico. My husband and I are dairy farmers in eastern New Mexico, and we farm along with his parents and several of his brothers and their families. Our dairy is an open lot style dairy, as you can see, which is fairly common in New Mexico and throughout the West, and we milk Holsteins. For me personally, I'm a fifth generation dairy farmer and grew up my whole life on a dairy farm here in New Mexico. So New Mexico is definitely home, as well as dairy farming being a part of my heritage. I work on our dairy farm as an environmental scientist, and I've done that for about the last decade. And, you know, it really has opened my eyes to some of the challenges that we face with data collection and access to data for farmers. Before I went into private environmental consulting, I worked for a university that specifically looked at collecting data and information and research for farmers. And so I know just how crucial giving farmers access to data and information can be when they're making informed management decisions, especially about climate smart solutions. For us personally, we recently implemented some new crops that are to save water, that are drought resistant and just require less water in our operation. And water is definitely our limiting resource here in New Mexico. So anything we can do to improve and reduce water use is crucial for the longevity of our farm. And this new crop that we planted, we just didn't have access to a lot of information about it. We spent hours and hours researching, reaching out to people, trying to learn a little bit more about this new crop we were planting. And to be honest, we really just didn't find the information we were looking for. And it made it really hard for us to make management decisions, especially once the crop was out in the field and we were experiencing, different technical difficulties with it. We could have used some information. And so making sure that farmers have access to data, access to information is going to be crucial in moving forward with climate smart solutions. Another key area that we need to be focused on, and I know that the Biden administration has announced this with their infrastructure plan, is broadband internet. We need to make sure our rural communities have access to solid internet, fast internet, reliable internet. As a person who works from home and has for the last decade, everything I do is dependent on me having internet. And I can't tell you the number of times I haven't been able to go to work because my internet has failed or has suddenly stopped working. This shouldn't be happening in 2021. Everyone should have access to solid internet. And it's crucial for making more informed decisions. Everything on our lives now is digital and on the internet. And so we need to make sure that our farmers have that same opportunity to access information and have access to fast internet. Well, those are just some of my thoughts. I hope you guys will enjoy the rest of your meeting and take what I've said into consideration. And thank you for spending a little bit of your time on our dairy farm here in New Mexico.
So we wish to thank Tara for doing this presentation. She has been a champion for the work around having important data and information to make sound decisions. And I think having farmers at all of our efforts and at the table have been just so important and have allowed us to make a lot of breakthroughs in what we're seeking. So with respect to AGREE, we have long championed improving data infrastructure for agriculture, and we're going to continue to do so with this administration and Congress. And I know our panelists that you will hear from shortly will attest to that. We specifically want to know how the president's infrastructure agenda incorporates climate smart research and data infrastructure, like Tara alluded to in her presentation. We know that better data will allow farmers to make informed decisions and help producers prioritize climate smart agriculture practices that make sense for their operations. And when we say data infrastructure, we mean creating systems and platforms for data collection, for data interoperability, and data sharing while protecting producer privacy. So we're going to ask our panelists today to reflect on all of this and what does it mean for our work in climate smart agriculture. So now I'd like to turn to our distinguished speakers. And I would like to first introduce Dr. Carrie Castile, who is the director of USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture. We refer to it as NIFA. She's been a longtime friend and a Louisiana native who has championed agriculture and rural issues for more than 20 years. So Carrie, before you speak, I would like to frame up a question for you about, how is NIFA thinking about research and data infrastructure? And how does what you do at NIFA relate to the department's broader goals, and for that matter, the external community that you so often engage? So Carrie, please.
Thanks, Deb, and I appreciate the opportunity to present what we're doing at NIFA on the webinar. It's been a great, I think, partnership between Meridian as well as our land grant community. So I do want to also take an opportunity to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm new. I've been on the job for about 3 months as the NIFA director. And maybe tell you a little bit about my background, maybe list some of the priorities as to what we're doing at USDA, and then really dive into climate change and data. So to start off with, I'm a Louisiana native, came from a small community called Breaux Bridge, Louisiana, population of about 6,000 or 7,000 people. Went to school at a non-land grant university at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, and where they really have a strong expertise around data. And data management. Got my master's and PhD at LSU, and had an opportunity to work and cut my teeth at cooperative extension, really working in the agricultural and natural resources focus. And it was, to me, probably one of the best opportunities that I've had to be able to understand what the needs are of producers, especially around the natural resources space. It might be water quality or it might be soils. But what the needs are and what our role is in extension and the land grant universities. Then from there, I had an opportunity to work as with the State Department of Agriculture and Forestry under Commissioner Mike Strain as a science advisor. And then had a chance to be kind of an end user of the work that we're doing with the land grant universities and through USDA, as working through the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture, as well as the USA Rice Federation, really looking at what is done with the land grant universities through research as well as extension and education, how that translates and makes its way to the ground level, to the end users. Then had an opportunity, and when I saw the video and listening to the need for broadband, I had an opportunity to serve as the state director for rural development in Louisiana. And we've had so many conversations around data and broadband and the need for that, that last mile and what that looks like and how it can be transformative for our producers. So that really resonated with me, and I'm glad those comments were mentioned. And then had an opportunity now to work as the director for NIFA. So let me tell you a little bit about NIFA and what our role is really in the climate change space. And really it's a whole of NIFA approach, looking at how we invest in foundational and applied research, education and extension programs, and how we can advance climate change mitigation, adaptation, as well as strategies for producers, small businesses, and consumers of food and agricultural products. So that's really what we do. We're an extramural funding organization. We work through our partners, through our land grant universities. I like to say we're a connector of innovation and research and information and data to the people that really need it. And really my goal as the NIFA director is to identify real world solutions for real world problems. So let's talk about our priorities at USDA. And I hope as I go through these, you'll be able to see yourself in a few of them. So first, starting with leveraging science, data, and research to end the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, it's on a lot of our minds, as well as rebuilding our economy. We're looking at improving nutrition insecurity. We're putting food, agriculture, and forestry at the center of climate smart solutions to address climate change. We want to build a more resilient food system that's fair for producers of all sizes and backgrounds, as well as ensuring racial equity and rooting out discrimination in USDA programs and services. So I will tell you, not only do I, but NIFA as well as USDA takes this pledge very seriously, and we want to make sure that we're being fair and equitable in everything we do in our panels, as well as our workforce, and making sure that we see that in its integrated diversity, equity, and inclusion in everything that we do throughout our NIFA programs. So what's our approach to addressing climate change? We're really looking at a three-pronged approach. First, adaptation, second, mitigation, and then the third being education and workforce development, making sure that we're growing our pipeline of scientists and those that can help address the challenges that we're facing. So let's talk a little bit about NIFA staff. At this point, we're about 226 strong. We've been able to attract some of the best US scientists in environmental, social, and animal plant science, social scientists, our animal and plant scientists, forestry, as well as public policy. And we're working, again, very, very closely with our land grant university partners and stakeholders, as well as our experts around the country to make sure that we're designing powerful grant programs to address climate change through research, training, education, extension, as well as outreach. So let me talk a little bit about some of our financial resources, and there's one that I'm going to highlight a little later in my comments. But really, what do we do? Again, being this extramural agency, we have numerous programs, both around capacity as well as our competitive programs that have funded climate change research, education, and extension projects. Here's a few of them that I'm going to name, but a couple of them are our McIntyre Stennis Cooperative Forestry Research Programs, our 1890 Capacity Building Grants, and then we also have programs through our AFRI, as well as our programs that directly serve our minority serving institutions. So let's talk a little bit about data. So again, I want to make sure that everything that we do is in the context and the lens of the availability of broadband. But here's kind of some high level, I think, priorities. One around big data as well as artificial intelligence. So we have some AI centers that we've been able to provide resources to. And then I do want to focus in on a program in which we're going to fund and provide about $500,000 dedicated to developing a public-private cooperative framework based on open data standards. Really, really important that we, again, look at how we utilize data, how we collect data, but how it's accessible to make more informed decisions. Very, very important to us. So what can you expect to see from NIFA as the next steps? So one, especially around the climate change, we want to make sure we're filling in knowledge gaps. Around carbon capture, around modeling, around monitoring, and analysis of our carbon markets. And the second, fostering grassroots climate change innovations in farm and forest management. Through our SARE program and our small business innovation programs, making sure that we're supporting farmer-initiated and regionally administered innovations in management practices to increase carbon sequestration and improve adaptation to climate change. The third, climate change extension and education. We talked a little bit about those efforts, but how we're going to invest in fostering strong connection between our climate hubs as well as our cooperative extension service to enhance knowledge transfer from our hubs to our farmers. And then lastly, addressing equity issues and climate change impacts. Again, making sure that we're investing in research that's fair and equitable, not only in our programs, but also in the research itself. So thank you so very much. I do want to mention a couple of things, a strong desire from me to really look at mission to mission, regardless if we're working within RCS, working across departmental with EPA and our other partners, our Department of Interior, working with our external partners through our land grant universities and our commodity groups, and agree. But again, thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing from our other panelists.
Great, thank you, Carrie. And I should mention that you can put questions in the Q&A box and we will curate them, and we will ask questions of the speakers when we are finished, or when they're finished, excuse me. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Boehm. Dr. Mike Boehm is the Vice Chancellor of the Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources at the University of Nebraska. Mike is an expert in his field and leads the effort across the university system for all agriculture, natural resources, and rural economic prosperity. And Mike, as a framing question, what is the University of Nebraska doing to create the data systems and infrastructure that a land grant university researcher needs to enable their work and answer important questions?
Yeah, Deb, thanks very much. And wouldn't you know, today they're working on the office below me. So if it gets a little loud, I apologize. We go all the way through COVID, and today is the day they're going to break a hole in a wall. So I'm coming to you from Lincoln, Nebraska, at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. And it is really a privilege. Thank you for the invitation to be a part of Gree's panel and to share the screen with Dr. Castile and with Katie. And I look forward to learning. We have a nice group of participants. So every day I wake up, I'm a plant pathologist by training, just a little bit there to follow on Carrie's lead. I grew up in a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio, right on the southern shore, I guess, northern shore of Lake Erie, depending if you're in Ohio or in Ontario, Canada, looking south. Went to a small liberal arts college, biology major, and then went to Ohio State for graduate degree programs. I was a USDA postdoc in Oregon, small university professor, and then back to Ohio State, and then here to Lincoln, Nebraska. And every day I wake up in my role thinking about three things, really: how we feed, fuel, fiber a growing world. We all know the story about the increased population. We all know the complexities around pernicious cycles of poverty and water and food insecurity. We know about the complexities of our global food system, and we know that America plays a key role in feeding this growing world. We also think a lot about sustainability. So how do we, as we heard Tara talk about in the video, she with great pride, a fifth generation dairy farmer, and how do we think about the next 5 generations, and how do we take care of our land and our water and the air that we breathe? And how do we do that in a way that promotes a sustainable practices for the next generation? So we think about families, individuals, families, and communities, especially in rural America, but also in our urban centers. And candidly, the codependency. We like to put things into buckets, but we really are codependent in rural and urban and micropolitan America. And so those are the things that I wake up every day, and I'm privileged to work with an amazing group of students, faculty, staff, and producers to think about this complex integrated system and how we move the needle. So those are the big pictures, the items, kind of going back a little bit, thinking about 1900, thinking about how 40% of Americans had something to do with where their food came from. And back then the big rage was horse and animal drawn implements. And then steam power came along and we moved to mechanized efforts. And then we moved to better living through chemistry after World War II and the development of hybrids. And then we had the omics, genomics, proteomics, metabolomics. And now today we're in the big data era. So thinking about where we're at and how we harness big data, not only for agricultural profitability, but as we think about regenerative agriculture practices, as we think, as Carrie mentioned, about climate smart agricultural as we think about the farm of the future, if you will, and how data, like the rest of our life, how data infuses into that, and all of the complexities that go with, as Tara said, the real-time access to information, and how that information can be used to drive real-time data-driven solutions. That's where we're at right now. I think I'll sum up my comments by saying, what are we thinking about? As Carrie mentioned, NEFA's efforts in this space, we're thinking about how can we do a better job, both at the University of Nebraska, but through our partnerships with the Ag Research Service and our partnerships with producer groups, commodity boards, and private industry, to pull the data that already is being generated, as you mentioned, Deb, to pull that together into a bit of a data warehouse, if you will, have it tagged, have it retrievable, maintain the cybersecurity that's part of our life today. Think about it as a co-op, that the data belongs to the producers or the entity that puts the data in. But then how do we fairly, and what are the rules of engagement for accessing that data, ultimately to visualize data, complex data sets, whether it's environmental data about vegetation or drought, or field level data about yield, and bring all of that together in a way that adds value to our producers, which then ensures the viability of agriculture production in America, taking care of our resources, but also at the same time, through our partnerships, move the needle forward in creative ways such that private industry and agriculture innovation, which is so key to this, can grow. I think there's a bit of a glass ceiling is what I'll say. I'll be a little provocative there. We're collecting a lot of data. Data is not information. And so how do we harness this in a cooperative fashion? So we're using the data co-op idea here in Nebraska, but truth be told, I'm very much excited to work with NEFA and our leaders there, and the leaders across the land grant system and industry, and with groups like Agree, to really think about how we can develop architecture around open data sources that advance agricultural innovation, that also mitigate climate change. And so that's where I'll stop. And again, thanks. I look forward to your questions.
Great. Thank you, Mike. And oh yeah, we'll get back to your concept, because you're singing our tune. We've been talking and working on this subject for a number of years. Now, I'd like to introduce our third speaker, Katie Nasons. Katie is a senior professional staffer serving as the research lead on the U.S. Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee. And I know she has spent time at USDA as well. And Katie is truly a leader when it comes to research. And I thank you for joining us. So Katie, can you let us in on the conversations that you're having at the Senate Agriculture Committee with the chairwoman and with Mr. Bozeman's staff and others regarding research and the overall themes and priorities that are emerging? So Katie, take it away.
Great. And thank you again for inviting me as well to join this great conversation about agricultural research and data. To also follow after the other speakers, I grew up in southeastern Minnesota in Rochester, in the middle of agriculture country in the Midwest, and have always loved visiting the Great Lakes. So really excited to be out here now, but I really miss being back in the Midwest too. I went to college at the University of Wisconsin in La Crosse, and shortly after that, I moved out to Washington, D.C. I've spent the past 7.5 years working for Senator Stabenow on the Senate Agriculture Committee on a number of food, farm, and rural issues, including agricultural research. And then prior to my time on the committee, I worked in the Obama administration at USDA in a variety of roles. So I'm really excited again to be part of this conversation and look forward to the questions at the end. First of all, Deb, as you mentioned earlier, President Biden's American Jobs Plan includes an overall priority for climate research, innovation, and research infrastructure. This is really, really exciting and timely to this conversation and discussion. The new emphasis on research is going to give the agriculture community and Congress an opportunity to assess our agriculture research needs and build support for an agriculture climate research agenda in a potential infrastructure package. We don't have a lot of details yet. We don't know what's going to happen, but I'm really excited that this is going to start the conversation around agriculture climate research. As everyone knows, agriculture research and data collection are critical to new technology and natural solutions that are going to be needed to mitigate and adapt to climate change. We need funding for basic research tools that are going to establish and strengthen baseline information, create new protocols, set new data sets for things like soil health, water quality, biodiversity, long-term ecological changes, et cetera. We need to make sure that our research tools are making improvements to data collections and the interoperability between research and decision-making on the farm. We also need to make sure that our new climate smart agriculture practices are able to set measurements and outcomes on things like carbon sequestration and water usage. And our new agriculture research tools are going to need to focus on the diversity of agriculture production, whether it's specialty crops or livestock, whether it's growing practices from organic, conventional, even some of the high-tech, innovative agriculture production that we're starting to see. We also need to focus on scale and the size of the farm. And we need to make sure that our research evaluates the societal impacts of climate research. Most importantly, our agriculture climate research agenda needs to remain nimble, especially as we adapt to the changing needs and priorities of farmers, foresters, and rural communities in order to be able to adapt to any kind of climate change crisis or need that arises. And in addition to more agricultural research and data collection, other key themes have really started to emerge around partnerships and coordination, technology transfer and technical assistance, and research, equipment, and infrastructure. Partnerships across all facets of the agriculture system are critical to advancing agriculture climate research. From public and private partnerships that make the most of federal investments, to our farmers working with researchers on the ground to specifically work on targeted solutions. All types of partnerships are going to be needed to maximize the impact of our ag climate research. We also need to think about better coordination and strategic alignment. This is going to be fundamental to developing our new agriculture solutions to respond to climate change. Right now, agriculture climate research is being conducted in more than 36 different programs and initiatives across USDA, as well as by several of our federal partners. I know some of the others mentioned this, but Department of Energy and Defense, NOAA, NASA, the National Science Foundation are all also working on agricultural climate research. We have the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research and numerous other private sector and nonprofit partners. So we need to make sure that these efforts are all coordinated into one strategic ag climate research agenda. Technology transfer and technical assistance is another key to adapting and adopting new climate smart agricultural practices to get cutting edge research and information and data onto the farm and into the field. Not only does technical assistance and new technology need to be focused on the end user, but education and training opportunities also need to be made available across the entire food and agriculture system to ensure everyone has access to new resources. And finally, we have heard significant concerns about our aging equipment and infrastructure at both the Agricultural Research Service and at our agriculture land-grant universities. APLU just published an updated report that identified more than $11.5 billion in agriculture research facility and equipment needs. We know that infrastructure and having up-to-date buildings and equipment is vital and really important for our researchers and scientists to be able to conduct this really critically important research. The chairwoman's approach has consistently been to pursue agricultural research policies that are scientifically sound and bipartisan, building on what we know already works and driving research and innovation forward to foster the development of new tools that work for the entire food and agriculture system. Senators Stabenow and Roberts had a long track record of bipartisanship, working together on agricultural research from the creation of the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research in the 2014 Farm Bill to spending increases and new tools developed in 2018. I look forward to continuing on this path and working with my counterparts in Senator Bozeman's office to develop a new bipartisan strategy on agriculture climate research and agriculture research infrastructure. And I look forward to hearing a little bit more from you all today and answering some questions. So thanks again.
Well, thank you, and thank all of you. Yeah, I have all kinds of questions, but I also want the audience to be able to weigh in as well. But I want to start off with first saying to Mike, can you tell me more about how this warehouse that you're building? I we'd love to get more details out of you if at all possible. And I'd love to get a reaction from Katie and Carrie about it as well. But yeah, so please say more.
Well, prior to getting on, I said I mentioned that it takes a village, and it really does. I think what I've heard, and great comments, Katie and Carrie. It really will take all of us. We are, in humble personal opinion, we're far from one part of the system having all of the answers. And in fact, it's a bit dangerous for one part of the system to think they've got all the answers, because as we think about the complicated integrated food system, fiber fuel system in this country, but all the global system, you can have all the right intentions and go in and just focus on one piece of the system with the best intentions in mind and perhaps some good solution sets, but you create dynamic tension in the rest of the system. And so for that reason, it's really going to take us all sitting at the table together. From a land grant perspective, there's fierce competition out there for students and funding, and that's part of it. But I like to think about co-opetition. We really do need to understand that we can't be all things at a single institution to all people, but we can be a focal point of strength. So in Nebraska, when I'm thinking about this co-op, we're really thinking about what are we good at in Nebraska? We're good at groundwater, surface water interactions, and cropping systems. We're good at beef production and sustainability of the grasslands in the sandhills of Nebraska. We're good at rural. We need to know what we're good at. We need to find partners who are interested in amplifying and augmenting, and we need to be a good partner to others across this amazing land grant system that we have. And it's going to take federal agencies. Some redundancy, Katie, is probably a terrific thing, but how much redundancy in our system makes sense? So what are we thinking? We're really thinking of, through the NEFA funding that Carrie mentioned, hopefully a conversation that can take place across the country, looking at the idea of climate smart agriculture and big data and how it influences the systems, bringing those best ideas to the table to begin framing what could be a bold, transformative move, perhaps in the Farm Bill in 2023, about how we think about a national system, a national warehouse, if you will, owned by producers and the farmers and the companies that put data into the system, with the appropriate rules that allow, on a regional basis. Randy asked this question in the chat box. From a regional perspective, that allows people to access the accumulated data at a high level using machine learning, data visualization to provide solution sets that can then be picked up to position America in that forward-leaning and maintain our forward-leaning position. So I don't have all the answers, Deb. That's part of the fun here. We're at the beginning of the journey. We want to be a part of it. We think we are a part of it here in Nebraska, but make sure everyone hears We're not so full of ourselves here. We're just a part of the solution, and we want to be a part of that journey.
Well, thank you, Mike. I'm going to ask Carrie about this. I mean, you heard Katie mention that you've got 36 different research initiatives underway in the climate space. You're hearing Mike talk about the need for a national system of data and data innovation and the ability to share information while protecting privacy. That is something AGREE has been promoting for at least 6 years now. And we're also looking at farm bill opportunities. So I think the more the merrier on this journey is really important. And I'd really like to hear, Carrie, what are you doing at USDA to on this very issue? Or what are you hearing, or what are you thinking about doing? What are you planning to do?
So from day one, we were pretty aggressive in terms of really looking at the staff and our capabilities, doing a deep dive on what we have, what are the existing historical programs that we have at NIFA, and how can we plug in. Of course, these conversations around climate smart agriculture, food, and forestry have been taking place for quite some time. They've been taking place for a long time at NIFA as well. So I think through looking at our traditional funding opportunities as well as what may come, we're ready to assist. We're I think energized. We want to be innovative, but we also want to make sure that we're being responsive. Quick example, after about few weeks that I started this job, I asked for volunteers as to how we really look at NIFA and how we can better partner. But I wanted volunteers. How many, who's the folks, who's our team, who's our army of folks within NIFA that are going to help to take us to this next level? Deb, I'll tell you, we had about over 40 folks that volunteered from day one. We spent hours and really, again, going through each line of our traditional RFAs and looking at what we can do to be able to advance capabilities and capacity in this space. We had an all hands discussion at NIFA about 3 weeks ago, and we started asking questions. How does climate change affect you? What does it look like for you? What can we do? And, to Michael's point, how climate change affects the Midwest is different from how it manifests itself in Louisiana through hurricanes and tornadoes and, and storms. So it is such a big, big subject, but I want to reemphasize to you our commitment, my commitment as to how we examine this. Data is going to be key. I mean, it absolutely will be. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to look at where we've been to know where we need to be. But public-private partnerships, making sure that we're reaching out, I say we go big on this. And I'm really, again, looking forward to these opportunities. I think as we look at our vision, I think it's imperative that we hear from you. Not just our traditional partners, but also our non-traditional partners, really reaching out to our stakeholder groups. I think it's also imperative that we hear from our producers. What does this really look like for them, and what's reasonable? What can we do in the now, and where do we need to be?
Great. Well, now I'm going to ask if these questions are really good, but now your responses are really good, but I would like a follow-up question that you mentioned, Mike, about regional questions, and then how is this information going to flow back to the farmers and ranchers and say the Rocky Mountain region versus in the Southeast or in California? How, an idea has been raised about creating a regional research project system of some type. This could be an approach employed to encourage cooperative research and reduce duplication. Thoughts? This could be a good question for the committee to look at in a hearing, Katie. These are good subjects, but yeah.
Yeah, I love Leonard's question, and again, Carrie's response. We need to look at where we've been, think about where we're at to inform where we're going. And again, unabashedly proud of the network that we have in this country. It's amazing when it comes to food, agriculture, climate, natural resources, and supporting the citizens of this great country. And it spills well beyond in intentional ways around the globe. We have many wonderful regional networks in this country. They're healthy. The regional research platform that brings folks together to look at regional complex issues. That's really healthy. We need to implore that. We have a regional climate center platform that NOAA just announced a $21 million investment or reinvestment. That's fantastic. We have congressional, in the last omnibus bill, there were some great examples of regional projects that bring teams together to think about this, these wickedly complicated issues. And Carrie said, not more eloquently, the context is regional. The principles can be central, but the context is regional. And we really then do need to think about how we take the information that's being generated locally. I've got right here in my hand, on-farm research platform from Nebraska Extension. This has been going on for 35 years, funded through NEFA, that allows us to co-create solutions with our producers and the people producing our food, fuel, feed, and fiber. They have to be co-architects. And again, kind of back to this, I really think that we collectively are the co-architects of Agriculture 2.0 in America. We really are. And I think this is an exciting, and AGREE is bringing together 150 people to talk about it today. And it's going to take all of us pulling in the right direction. So again, perhaps a lot of deep ideas. I think we've got some things to wrestle with. Multinational corporate companies are collecting data off combines and planters. That data is going into a corporate protected space. How do we get access to those data? How do we bring that data in full partnership into this complex place? And at the end, how do we make sure that our farmers and producers and processors are getting value directly back on the farm such that we can keep things going? So there's lots of wickedly complex pieces that we're going to have to address, but I'm convinced that we're together we're better.
Well, on that point, how can we ensure that diverse farming operations and ranchers and systems that are currently, not their research initiatives need to look at the diversity we have in agriculture? And you talk about the corporates, but what about the people that have been left behind or not engaged in our research enterprise? Can you speak to that? I look, Katie, I know it's a priority for the chairwoman, but if you could say something about the whole business of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what does that mean? And then I'm going to ask Carrie to respond as well, and Mike.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that actually really builds off of the regional conversation as well, because, when you look at all of the diversity of agriculture, a lot of it is regional. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're looking at the diversity of production, whether that's specialty crops or livestock, or if it's, organic, we need to make sure that there is funding going into all the different types of agricultural production and taking into account all of those regional differences. In addition to the diversity of production, we also need to make sure that the money is getting to our diverse land grant system. And so, be it the 1862s or the 1890 historically Black colleges, the tribal colleges and Hispanic serving institutions, we need to make sure that not only are the people who are doing the research are also being supported with funding, but that the types of production. And I think, another great way to do that is looking at some of the public-private partnerships, looking at new ways to look at research, new regional opportunities. I think that we're going to continue to hear a lot of those themes, and we're going to need to make sure that stakeholders are part of all of these conversations to ensure that the research dollars and the research needs are being met across the entire food supply.
Yes, thank you. And Carrie, can you say more, because you brought it up in your comments about how you are going to serve the underserved?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I want to echo everything that Katie said. These are really important conversations. This is an important dialogue that we're having throughout USDA. We're not only looking at our workforce, we're looking at our panels, we're looking at the subject matter, making sure that it is equitable, and it's inclusive, and we're looking at a diverse range of topics. Our teams being cross-disciplinary, making sure that, again, what we talk about is going to reach a wide range throughout the entire audience. Looking at, as well as infrastructure, making sure that we all have the support that's necessary. If we're going to do groundbreaking research, to your point about infrastructure, we're looking at groundbreaking research facilities and making sure that we have that support. But again, these conversations are taking place throughout USDA. We're having, again, just like we took the conversation around climate change with our all hands, we're going to have that conversation, same thing with our all hands at NIFA around diversity, equity, inclusion. Really looking at it through an objective lens, but from my perspective, really action oriented and results driven. And I know you've heard that a lot, and you're going to continue to hear it. But again, results driven. We got to make sure that when we have these conversations, we have everybody at the table. And again, we're working towards results, immediate results.
Great, thank you, Carrie. I'm going to ask a couple of questions now that have come in from the audience. I want this first question from Jane Melancady. To date, there has been prioritization in research of the systems that are key contributors to GHGs: large farms, specialized production, limited biodiversity, concentration of germplasm, et cetera. How do you plan to harmonize this in your research and data systems? I'll throw that out to Mike and Carrie. Well, Carrie, I mean, you're on mute. Carrie, you're on mute.
So the conversations around the harmonization around data, I think that's something that we all need to contribute to. I'm really, there's I think opportunities for where USDA and NIFA really leads from the front, but there's also opportunities for us to lead from the back. And I think it's around this conversation of how we partner together and how we really look at ways in which we can create a collective vision around that. I'm going to ask Michael to also weigh in.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Great question, Jane. Lots of ways, I think, to address this. Our large production systems tend to have monocultures, tend to large acreage. But I think also when you take a look at our systems, I'll take a look at grazing and rangeland management. That's one of the most diverse ecosystems on the planet. And we spend a lot of time, especially in this part of the world, west, looking at rangeland health, harmonizing production of cattle and bison and sheep on those marginal lands, and how agriculture enhances through conservation practices the quality of those lands. We also work with small shareholder producers, and that's, I think, part of the beauty of our land grant system and the U.S. government through USAID, Feed the Future programs, Farm Food for Progress. We engage around the world. We really are partners at taking the blessings that we have in this country, scaling them. Katie mentioned scalability, scaling solutions that add value to the small shareholder producers around the globe, or even larger agricultural producers around the globe. We also learn from those interactions, and we bring that learning through extension back into our communities. So I think actually it's the narrative and how we tell the story. I think that there's a deep commitment to understanding agroecological systems, agroecosystem services, the resilience of those systems, and how we harmonize production of food, fuel, feed, and fiber with that in mind. I think urban agriculture is really, something, and regional food systems. It's all part of that. And in some contexts, it might be, more fruits and veggies have a more direct connection to the consumer. And in other production systems, there might be some steps in the food system between between the field and the consumer. So I think we are thinking about all of these things. I think we could do a better job there, but that's my answer to your question.
Yes. And I think, there is growing clarity that, hang on, I was reading, there is growing clarity that agroecological and regenerative solutions are part of the important and mandatory to address climate issues and soil health. So you see a lot of that. And I think, Mike, to your point that could we do more, I believe we need to do more based on what I'm hearing and reading and my experience to date. I would want to ask a question that's come in. It's a little bit different, focused on privacy, agriculture data privacy. And I know it's an issue, Katie, you hear it from producers about what USDA shares and doesn't share. And I know we can do this right. Other departments can share the basic information that's anonymized that can create the kind of results and answers to important research questions to guide not only policy makers, but to guide farmers and ranchers who are looking for information to make decisions on their operations. A long way of saying, Mike, how are you going to protect data privacy, and how are you going to do this? And Carrie, same to you. How are you even going to track what you're collecting, and how are you going to create systems to protect the privacy of farmer information?
Carrie, you want to go first, or you want me to go first?
Well, on this one, I mean, we have laws that are protecting our farmers' privacy. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, we're very, very clear, and I get it. I totally get it. I mean, in respect to Tara and all of the investments that's been made, et cetera, looking at that video and all the work that they've done. But it's a tough challenge. We need the data in order to be able to make better decisions. But it's critical that we make sure that we're maintaining that privacy. It's a tough one. It really, really is tough.
Yeah, I'd throw cybersecurity into this one too. I mean, there's not a day, even at my own institution, I heard some crazy thing, 10 million cyber intrusions a day. So there's an army of cyber warriors trying to keep us from being hacked and so forth. This is a big deal. And I guess part of it is that academics are really good at certain things and we're not good at others. So back to the private-public partnerships, I think there's a slew of innovators in the cybersecurity space that need to be part of our conversation. And I'm not sure in normal agriculture, natural resources circles that those are people that we normally interact with. So back to the partnership, there's a lot here to chew on, and we will choke if we're not careful. So we need to chunk this into pieces, perhaps through different groups looking at different aspects of this complicated system, but we do need to make sure that it's articulated in a way that makes sense. And so I think we need to think more broadly. I think we need to think about our research librarians in a different way. I mean, they're the ones who collate information, tag information, help us visualize big trends over decades. We really need to think about partnerships in a different way, and there's a lot to work out in there, and we're going to have to all figure this out and have a commitment to working together. And there's real benefit and there are real costs if we do or don't do that.
Great, thank you, Mike. I'm cognizant of the time. We're getting close to the top of the hour. So let me ask you, Katie, after listening to the conversation today, do you have enough information that you might even want to conduct a hearing in this Congress about these important issues? I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think this has been a phenomenal conversation and has, brought to light some of the concerns we've been hearing, but also emphasizes the need for us to talk more about this. I am not the person on the committee that gets to set the agenda for the hearings. However, I am very pro the idea. But I do think this is really important, and everything from, privacy of data to ensuring that we're looking at a broad research agenda. This is going to be critical and really important to this entire conversation moving forward. And so, I think the one thing that we don't want to forget is continuing to invest in our structures that already exist, and thinking through, we have a couple of great data agencies at the department, both NAS and ERS. And I think mentioning the cybersecurity piece is really kind of a conversation that we haven't talked a lot about. And so we need to make sure that that's part of it too. But yeah, I think, this has been really exciting. And, as we look to finding ways to adopt and to mitigate against climate change, research and data collection is really going to be fundamental to that.
Super. So Carrie, you want to just say a couple of words before we wrap?
Well, so thanks, Deb. Thank you for the opportunity to share some of the stuff that we're doing at NIFA. As a new director, having these types of opportunities in these forums, I think it's great for me to, one, listen and learn. I think the goal of any leader is to get as much feedback and input as you can as you start to develop your vision. Having these conversations about data, having these conversations about climate change. And again, I think looking at the other priorities of USDA, when we start talking about food insecurity and what we're going to do to address some of the challenges like rural broadband, these are all part of, I think, an overall discussion and dialogue that we're having, but it's so insightful to be able to hear, I think, from our panelists, from you, as well as the questions. It really gives us insight as to where we need to go. It's kind of the roadmap. So thank you so very much. I hope that this is the beginning of the dialogue and we can see more opportunities and identify more opportunities to continue the discussion, because I think it's so informative, at least for me, but I know for our organization and for USDA. So thank you so very much for the opportunity.
Well, and thank you. So Mike, you get the last word.
I'm just going to say thank you. And I learned a lot. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Katie. Thanks to the panelists for the questions. There were lots of important questions in there. Michael Carlo had a great conversation about diversity and inclusion and where we're at in this country and where we aspire to be. I'm hopeful and energized by what I heard today, and just reinforces in my mind that we are all in this together, that partnerships will be important. A lot of heavy lifting, but we're good at rolling up our sleeves in agriculture and natural resources and working collaboratively. I look forward to the journey. Thank you for the opportunity.
Excellent. Well, thank you. From my heart and from the team Agree, we appreciate it. And we appreciate all the participants who listened in today. And you can hear yourselves, panelists, on the recording that we'll post later as soon as we can download it. So thank you, good luck, and I look forward to working with all of you as we move forward in this Congress and in this administration. So thank you so much and have an excellent day. Bye-bye.